Welcome to This Week on Travel World 95. Glad you could join us. I'm Stephen Pickford. Later on today's show, we'll be looking at Air Canada, as Montreal's hometown airline, how they are planning to take advantage of the Open Skies Agreement. When looks at the various advertisements in the Gazette, they may have thought that Open Skies has only been a benefit to the American carriers, adding new routes, adding new services. How is Air Canada looking to take advantage of these new challenges that lie ahead? But first, travel insurance. In this era of rising healthcare costs worldwide, reductions in provincial Medicare coverage for people traveling outside of the province, it's more important than ever to make sure that you're covered for medical accidents and various illnesses that may occur when away from home. Joining me now is René Rockbrun. He's Director of Travel Industry Marketing in Canada for Mutual of Omaha Travel Insurance. Welcome to Travel World.
How are you?
Well, I'm glad you could join us. Now, as I mentioned, travel insurance is often in the news these days. We hear about the coverages that are being reduced by provincial governments. How drastic have these cuts been?
They've been very radical over the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's synonymous to what the federal budget is doing and how it's affecting the provinces. And of course, they look for areas where they can cut down. Travel insurance has been a prime target. For the simple reason is that they don't have control over what the charges might be at the other end. In Canada, if you're hospitalized or what have you, generally people don't see the bill. In the US, where it is a prime location, it's a prime travel destination for Canadians, the cost of medical care is very expensive and not controlled by government, basically. So this explains why there has been such a radical change over the last 2 or 3 years.
Right, so provincial governments are cutting their coverage, but at the same time those costs are forever skyrocketing everywhere in the world.
Yes, and especially the United States is probably one of the most expensive areas. Of course, you do get quality medical care down there, and it is a prime destination for Canadians. And let's face it, I mean, the Canadian snowbird goes to Florida, goes down south. He needs the warm weather, and that's where the costs have skyrocketed.
Right. Now, of course, when the costs of providing that care skyrocket, this also impacts the opposite way on the rates that are being charged for that medical coverage.
Well, that's right. Unlike governments, we can't go back to the taxpayer and just increase the taxes. We have to do it via the rates. So, of course, we have to adjust the rates accordingly to meet the demand for the high payments that are being requested.
And of course, this also means that the longer you stay, of course, there becomes a plateau. I guess these are all based on actuarial figures, the age of the person, how long they're going to be away. So it may, to some people, figure why after 30 days all of a sudden that per day rate may jump or whatever.
There are 3 things that really will affect the rate: the age, the destination, and the duration, of course. Combination of a long stay for someone that could be 65 and above. In the United States, yes, once you are hospitalized, it could be very costly. And the risk, if you're down there for 6 months, then the risk, of course, is that much greater.
Right. Now, some people will then say, well, we're at that age, we can't afford it. We can't afford the coverage. Of course, it's going to cost them more if they eventually had to go to hospital there, but they may sort of gamble and say, we don't need to buy the insurance for that length of time.
Stephen, that's the classic approach to it. A lot of people, I don't know how many times we've heard, I'm going on holidays, I'm not going to be sick. I've got it at the office, it's part of my group plan, I've got it on my credit card or what have you. A lot of people do travel unprotected and are really not aware of the danger. Someone could be hit with a bill of $50,000 and the government will pay like $5,000, so you are stuck with paying the rest, and it must be paid. Again, as I can only repeat, is that we do not see and we don't know what it costs up here because we really don't see the bills. Down there, they're sent to your attention and they want you to pay them. And of course, the provincial government is not going to pay the total amount.
Right, they're only going to pay a fraction, a couple of $100 at the very most. Now, they will also, some people will shop around at different policies, not really doing it only on price, but not really reading what those policies are going to cover.
The greatest mistake someone can make today in purchasing travel insurance is to buy the price. There are very inexpensive products in the marketplace. I think you've got to look at the combination of coverage, the definitions, the exclusions, and that's probably the most important part. What are you really covered for? A lot of people think they will buy inexpensively, and they leave the country with a false sense of security. They may be excluded from coverage. I think it's vitally important today that before you make the purchase, put the price aside. I think what you've got to look at is, what are you buying?
Right, what is being covered in that policy? Look at the fine print. It's fine to exclude covering for illness A, B, and C, or based on certain pre-existing conditions that you may have only had when you were 20, 30 years ago, but using that as a loophole to not pay.
And you know, quite honestly, is that what is insurance? You know, when people buy a holiday today, they get to see the airplane, they sit down, they fly down there, they get the onboard service, and of course they go swimming and they see the hotel. Insurance is nothing less than a piece of paper and nothing more than a promise to pay. And I think that the only time that they really are concerned with what they've purchased is when they need it.
Right. Now, of course, another element and that's important to somebody when they're away is how is the insurance company going to look after them when they're away, their on-site assistance, how they're going to look after their claims.
That's the moment of truth, as we call it in the industry. When that phone call is made and that person enters the hospital, just what is the insurance company going to do? Assistance becomes a vital part of this today. You may have Canadians of French origin or English origin or of other languages actually who will travel to a destination where they do not speak their tongue. And they need actually someone who will actually transmit the information, you know, certainly help them out at the hospital and make their stay a little more pleasant. So assistance plays an important role. They will certainly, you know, select doctors, work with doctors, contact the family, contact your family doctor, and so on. So that will make your stay at the hospital a lot more, it's much better for the client who needs to feel secure. I mean, certainly when you're hospitalized, you don't go into a hospital to be, you know, you don't go to a holiday to be sick. You're hospitalized because something's happened. And security becomes vitally important there, and assistance plays an important role in the care that you get down there.
Right. Now, in addition to medical insurance, there are various other types of insurance that somebody can take out before they go, one of those being cancellation. Now, do you find, for example, cancellation insurance may be less popular now that many of the airlines have said, well, you can reuse your ticket for $50 for 1 or 2 years, and whereas they're not totally non-refundable anymore, they're reusable. Have you found that that's maybe impacted a bit on cancellation insurance?
There's another false sense of security. People think that well, yes, I can exchange my airline ticket, but it's not just the airline ticket. What about the deposits you've made on your condo? What about some side trips you may have purchased, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And can you really use that airline ticket at another time? I think what's vitally important is that the client must look at what is my potential financial loss? That's what I need to insure, and not necessarily tied down to an airline ticket or a condo or side trips you may purchase. What is the potential financial loss? That's what he's got to look at.
Right, because also it may be fine for the airline to say, well, you can reuse it or change it, but they also don't tell you that it has to be available on that particular day in that particular class of service. If you have to come back because of an emergency before or after, if you haven't stayed the 1 week or whatever, they're going to charge you the full fare to come back, which the insurance, if it was a valid reason, will reimburse you for the one way.
You know, there are products out there, basically, yes, that Mutual of Omaha is underwriting, like the Border Guard travel insurance product and the Travel Right insurance product, both of which have some very unique features. With Travel Right, up to 14 days prior to, you may cancel and get up to 50% of your money back. With Mutual of Omaha, there is a part of that package is called Holiday Sure Portion, which will actually pay another holiday should you miss 75% of it for a reason that you know forces you to come back home. These are the types of things that it's not just a matter again of exchanging the date of your travel, you know, with the airline. What have you really got? What have you purchased? And you've got to look at all of these things. They will certainly help you enjoy a better holiday.
And another type of coverage you can get is baggage insurance to protect you in case of loss or theft on the aircraft. People think, again, false sense of security, as you mentioned, oh, the airline will cover it, but again, not true.
Correct. They will, you know, a lot of people don't read the inside cover of their airline ticket. The actual coverage is limited, but it's not just the airline. It's certainly is that you could be on the beach, you could be in a hotel, you could be in a taxi, in a bus, anytime during your holiday. You're at risk of having your baggage stolen. So certainly it is good to have that kind of coverage as part of your insurance plan. By the same token is that you must also check exactly what you are covered for with your home plan, and then you buy the excess insurance, baggage insurance that you need.
Right, you basically check what you're covered for and then buy up from it. Don't just assume that you're going to have that coverage, for example, with the credit cards or what have you, because a lot of people, as you alluded to before, they'll say credit card, we've got the coverage, but 9 times out of 10 it will not cover them for medical for a very long time. If any, it will not cover them for things like cancellation or that, so they really have to check what they're going to get.
Stephen, I think that it's vitally important. A lot of people, again, travel with a false sense of security, concerning all aspects of insurance. I think what you've got to do with your travel agent prior to departure is look at the pitfalls and certainly ask him what you need and point out the coverage you may or may not have. But to just say, well, I've got a credit card, it's on there, or it's part of my group plan, or I've got it at work, or even I'm not going to be sick, they don't work when you really need the insurance and the money.
Right. Renee Rockbrunn of Mutual of Omaha, thank you very much for dropping by today on Travel World and reminding us that while we as Canadians may be the most insured people in the world when it comes to life insurance, that our insurance needs don't go on holiday when we do. They're more important than ever. We'll be right back after this week's edition of The Travel Corner.
Hello, my name is Peter Cashin. I'm a photographer and I operate 3 portrait studios in the Montreal area. I'd like to tell you a few interesting things about Canadian passports because most travelers need them. The passport as such was invented by the Romans many thousands of years ago, and it consisted of a letter from the emperor certifying that you were a favored subject and he would like you to be treated kindly. This was a great advantage to travelers because anyone that didn't treat that person kindly might get a visit from the Roman legions. This practice carried down through the ages right up to the British Empire when the passport was enhanced with the addition of a photograph which more accurately identified the carrier. In order to obtain a modern passport as a Canadian citizen, you need to have an application which you can obtain from any post office. With that application, you must submit your original birth certificate, not a photostat, and $35, the current passport fee, and fill out the form and have one photograph and the form signed by a guarantor, which is a person who is a member of a professional group listed on the application. A bank manager, doctor, lawyer, dentist, notary, one of these things. The reason that the process includes these professionals is, to my knowledge, there are lists, professional lists of these people that make it very easy to verify that that person is real. However, present security arrangements make it very likely that the officials will want to speak to your guarantor. Therefore, don't have a guarantor sign for you who is going to be away on vacation, and if the government people can't speak to him, there could be an unpleasant and unnecessary delay. Now, the Canadian passport is perhaps one of the world's most honored passports. Getting it is relatively easy. It takes 5 working days. Under the old law, which was in effect until April of 1992, your travel agent could get your passport for you. The law has been changed in order to enhance our security arrangements. Now, you or a member of your family must appear at one of the 3 local passport offices at least once. A member of your family living under the same roof can go for you. Very elderly persons that are in frail health can have a person who is not a relative. It's good to call the passport office, but the people there are very pleasant and very helpful, and they will make special arrangements for very elderly persons. Once you have presented your documents and your photograph signed by your guarantor, the application signed by your guarantor, and paid the fee, you'll be given a pickup slip, and in 5 working days, you'll have your Canadian passport. And you can carry it with pride and great pleasure because it opens many, many doors for you. And it's something that is well worth that little bit of trouble that you have to take every 5 years. People often ask us, why can't we extend the Canadian passport? Well, the Canadian passport cannot be extended. It cannot be renewed. So when you apply for a passport, you're starting over from square one. You have to resubmit the photographs, resubmit your documents, go in person every single time because our country does not permit the extension of passports. Now, there are a few special situations when people have an emergency trip. They can get a passport faster than the 5 working days. It is, however, necessary to supply the officials at the passport office with proof of departure. You should have your paid airlines ticket, a telegram in the case of a death in the family overseas, for instance, a confirmation from your travel agent, something of that nature, so that you can give them reasonable cause to believe that there is a genuine emergency. Sometimes when we get anxious and nervous, almost anything can be an emergency. It has to be an emergency for the passport people to drop everything, stop everything, and serve you first. They will do it if it's really necessary. You'll find them unusually pleasant and courteous, and you'll find getting your passport a very positive experience. I thank you very much for listening to these little words of advice from me. If you have any other questions, call your local passport office, and you'll get plenty of help from them. Thank you very much for listening.
Now joining us to take a look at how Air Canada, as Montreal's hometown airline, wishes to capitalize on the Open Skies Agreement and a more liberalized Canadian aviation policy on the international front, and how these will all impact us in Montreal, both from an economic and a traveling standpoint. I'm pleased to be joined by Doug Slayton. He's International Alliances Director with Air Canada. Welcome to Travel World.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Well, to begin with, previous Air Canada management teams have been much more protectionist in their views as regarded competition with American and international carriers. What factors over the past year or so have prompted Air Canada to shift its corporate focus in this regard?
Well, I think that we saw some direct benefits of our new services that we introduced out in Toronto in the market to Houston, and we saw the market really respond to that. That gave us some hope that we could move forward. Plus the fact that we had a number of CL65s, the new Canadair regional jet, which were coming on stream. And the only process that was available during that period of time was one which one would have to apply for routes on an individual basis. And that was the only avenue that was open to us for expansion into the U.S. at that time. It was a long, cumbersome system and process that one had to go through, and many of the routes were only awarded on a discretionary basis. So we had to deal both with the government in Ottawa as well as the U.S., and there was a fair amount of opposition in the U.S. In order to move forward on that. So the minister, Mr. Young, met with Secretary Pena and tried to put things on track with the special representatives in the fall and obtain a breakthrough. And we thought that coupled with our experience in Houston, plus the North American free trade, would serve us well.
Right, because before it was all based on certain airports you could add service to because of their size. They were considered quote-unquote disadvantaged cities, and others you could only do it with a turboprop, like Montreal Boston used to only be allowed to be no more than 40 seats, this type of thing. So again, it was cumbersome, and the U.S. carriers would then have the upper hand.
That's correct. There were some certain limitations. The CL65 was an aircraft that fit all those criteria, but just the same, the U.S. carriers were looking to put in larger aircraft, and they had an opportunity to block some of those services because, as I said, they were only awarded on a discretionary basis. So it could have meant that we wouldn't have been able to deploy some of these new aircraft into the U.S., which we wanted to do.
Now, an aviation treaty as a whole can often be seen as an abstract by the average traveler. What do you see as the most tangible benefits for the actual end user of the services?
Well, I think in the case of Open Skies, it offers Air Canada the ability to serve any point in Canada at any point in the U.S. We're well positioned because we have these new aircraft coming on stream. For the consumer himself, it'll mean a lot of new direct services. Out of the agreement, there was a big breakthrough in being able to gain access to Washington National Airport. We will be introducing service from Montreal directly June 19th. And so I think that's just one example of some of the services that people will be able to benefit from. We will also, with the CL65, it'll allow us to access other markets that, not necessarily the majors, but rather than the customer traveling through a U.S. hub, we may find that that's the right type of aircraft. It's well perceived by the consumer, and we can go in and fly and serve the city pairs between Montreal and a U.S. city on a direct basis as opposed to over a hub. We still have that opportunity, you know, working with our alliance partners such as United and Continental, and I think that that will be able to attract customers as well. So I think that there's a lot of benefits down the road, as well as the frequent flyer programs, which most people are a member of at least one and sometimes two.
Right. So cities, for example, it's being looked at like Montreal to Cleveland as a possible route, or Montreal eventually getting its own service to Atlanta. These are cities where an aircraft like the Canadair regional jet would be more attuned to, more capacity and better range than a Dash 8, but avoiding having to go via Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and all these places.
That's correct, and it also, not just Air Canada itself, but our whole family of carriers such as Air Nova, Air Alliance and Air Ontario have also been able to benefit under these open skies agreements, because all of these carriers, the individual license is held by the carrier in question. So, for example, Air Alliance has introduced service to Philadelphia and to Hartford. Present or before they weren't served. In Ontario, with Air Ontario, they benefited through service to Columbus and Indianapolis, and so on. So there are increasing benefits that over time, as aircraft become more available, we will be able to turn up for the customers.
Right, it frees up aircraft that had to be put on another route just to maintain a presence, like the aircraft that was being used Montreal to Boston can now be used Montreal to Philadelphia. Now, as that competition heats up, particularly in the North American marketplace, how does Air Canada plan to market your service as a whole to position yourselves both vis-a-vis these larger U.S. carriers and also some of these low-fare new entrants in this era of cost-conscious consumers?
Well, I think our product is well received by the customer. Certainly, the customer wants value for his money. The services that we are putting in are just that. We offer value. We offer a better seat pitch. There's more comfortability. And the frequent flyer programs that we have support all of these. So I see us accentuating those aspects with the customer. Fares we're very competitive with. We have a range of fares, and so if the customers want to abide by the fences that are around there will be, they'll be able to participate and will be equally competitive to those.
Right, so basically not so much leading the pricing path, but matching competitively, but trying to differentiate your product on the service, the reputation that the carrier has developed to date in the North American marketplace. Now, on a marketing alliances and cross-ownership, you alluded earlier to United and Continental, and then also an international scene you have Air France sort of as a semi-marketing partner. How do you see these type of relationships expanding in, let's say, the next year or two?
Well, I believe it was just about a week ago where we had made an announcement that we were introducing code-sharing to 56 new points into the U.S. I mean, that's from across Canada. It'll allow us to expand where we can capitalize on the synergy of both partners working together to stimulate the traffic. As you can appreciate, to penetrate the market in the U.S. of 255 or 57 million people, it's a big chore. So that's where having a U.S. partner helps us because they have all of their marketing strengths in place. The synergies working together. We bring the north to the south traffic out of Canada, and they can bring the south to the north. So by both partners working together, you stand a much better chance of getting a return on your investment, particularly when you're launching new routes and it's difficult. You have all these startup costs, so you want to recover your investment over a pretty short period of time. So that's where the alliance partner comes into play in a big way.
Right, each carrier has its own domestic feed base, its own marketing presence in markets where they are better known, and they can draw in those customers and refer them onwards.
That's correct, and by having a partnership, particularly through your frequent flyer programs and your various links with travel agents and so on, you're able to build that customer awareness, and you're able to reach, obviously, a market segment that you wouldn't be able to reach before. So you're able to start maybe small, build your frequency, and capture a better share of the market by differentiating again your product to the competitors who are putting in perhaps a no-frills product.
Right. Now, of course, this same cross-ownership and marketing alliances also carry forward spin-off economic benefits here in Montreal because, for example, Montreal Base does a lot of contract work for Continental, for instance.
That's correct. Yes, we do a lot of contract work there, and you also have a whole other facet of the airlines, as an example, the cargo side, which we don't speak about. But there is a particular benefit there as well for shippers because they'll be able to move their product around that much more easily and more frequently because of the services that would otherwise have to be routed over another gateway at Toronto or Halifax or what have you. Pick a point.
Right. Now, but this also does not mean that even though there's a marketing alliance and that cross-ownership, the companies still all remain competitive with each other. They're still, for example, Air France will still sell their product, Montreal to Paris, and decide on their own pricing and that. It's just a referral type system.
Yes, basically that is correct. There's some, what you're trying to do is you're trying to coordinate and schedule your product so you can maximize the feed and the connections for passengers at the other end. In other words, we may be working with Air France and timing our schedules so that a customer out of Montreal will have a choice of 2 flights rather than flying head-to-head exactly the same time. If you miss that one flight because you're caught in the reconstruction of Route 13 or the likes in the summer, which could happen at the best of times, you have another option. And so we try to structure our schedules in such a fashion which you'd be able to have a better bank of connections at the other end, and you have the choice. So it's a benefit to the customer from that perspective, too.
Well, it sounds like the future holds good things in store for you. Thanks, Doug Sladen of Air Canada, for joining us today on Travel World, and thank all of you for joining us today on Travel World 95. I'm Stephen Pickford. Until next time, happy traveling, everyone.
Thank you.